Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here.
Okay, good morning and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the skills building workshop with respect to CI/CD Databricks with Azure DevOps. First of all, like to thank you all for attending the session with our busy schedule, and thanks to Stephanie Rivera for organizing this. Real quick, my name is Ravi Shankar. Like Stephanie mentioned, I'm a lead solutions architect, almost 4 years with Databricks, and I'm happy to go ahead and talk about CI/CD pipeline with Azure DevOps. As Stephen mentioned, please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hands, ask questions. Also, at the end of the session, I'll be sharing my the slide deck that I'm presenting today, along with the CI/CD YAML files, and along with all the other materials that comes with it. With that, so want to set a stage on this. The objective of this is to quickly describe on how do you manage the notebooks within your development instance, and then process through your staging and production environment, and how do you manage your entire Azure or how do you manage your entire CI/CD pipeline. So there is a lot of encompasses with respect to CI/CD. Every organization uses different tools, different processes and philosophies. And so for this, the objective of this session is not to provide you a very prescriptive like a suggestions. We are not going to tell you this is the only way to do it, but this is what we see in the field and what we see most of our customers are doing. So this is one way of in data, one way to do in how do you manage your entire workflow in using CI/CD. Also, the other thing is the other objective for also as part of this one is to provide you the best practices, some of the features built in as part of the Databricks platform that will assist you how to develop your code, how to test your code, and ultimately how do you promote the code into production, right? Topics are related to CI/CD, integration with different version control systems, what testing methods you have, how do you deploy this, and what sort of tooling we are going to use. As part of this, I'm going to also talk about a little bit with respect to a framework called Python library called Nutter, which is what I'm using as for this demo. We'll also talk about how Databricks can support with your development best practices, whether you are using an IDE or developing straight out of Databricks notebooks. We'll also talk about the CI/CD and the version controls. While we may not cover a specific tool that we are going to use at your company, but the idea here is kind of a very high level, and that's going to be the same for whatever the tools and technologies you are using at the back end. If you find that need more information with respect to this, like I said, this is going to be and I'm also providing you with all the materials for this. And finally, I'm not going to cover anything with respect to ML ops or even infrastructure as a code, Terraform. Both of these topics have enough depth to cover for a whole 1 hour by itself. So with the interest of time, I'm not going to cover those two topics as well. With that, so what is DevOps, right? DevOps is basically a set of practices, tools, and philosophies that automate and integrate your development and operation cycles. CI/CD is just one of the component of the bigger umbrella of DevOps, but is one of the main component as well. CI/CD stands for continuous integration, and the continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment depends on how far you are in the deployment process with respect to CI/CD. In a nutshell, it is a process for continuously integrating, testing, and deploying your code into production. It allows team to quickly release the quality product and and also to be like more frequently, and also like, you can also predictable, you can also predict like what's happening with with respect to the source code, rather than finding a bug later part of stage in the production. So a typical CI side CD pipeline consists of like two different phases. One is the continuous integration, and the second part is the continuous delivery or the continuous deployment. So with respect to the continuous integration, so developers practice continuous integration, like, basically you get a set of code or start from scratch, like, you start writing the source for a product or for a pipeline, and then this source needs to be tested, unit tested, and before it goes into your production and deploy in the production. So the very first step starts with um, developers committing the code to a repo, right? Like to any repository, and followed by that is like your unit test, in order to run quickly run or build the code and run a quick unit test on it. So for example, as part of your notebook, you might have a library that you have installed and used as part of your source, and you wanted that library, like make sure that it's all properly tested before it goes into your staging or production side. So the very first step on the CI part is developer. You change the code frequently, push the code, build an artifact, or build the packages for you to go and test it in staging and production. The next step, the continuous delivery or the continuous deployment starts with taking that whatever the artifacts, whatever the packages that you built as part of the integration side, test that, either be a unit test that runs within that part of in your staging environment, or it could be even run like more of an integration test, like at that point, like you can, like, instead of writing just testing a function in testing it, you can also test the entire notebook itself, which could be like connecting to a Hive metastore, could be anything. Like all of those things can be tested as part of the staging. And finally, the same code, once you are happy with the results that you get out of the staging, you can automatically then move the code to a production deployment as well. So as I said, it's typically a two-step process: continuous integration and continuous delivery. In Databricks, it's again the same process. The continuous integration involves coding either through an IDE or a notebook, and then like building the package out of it, and finally the release side of it. And then once the code has been released, you want either you want that code to be quickly deployed, tested, and then ready to be operated for production. So what are the key benefits of like continuous integration? Why do we need a continuous integration? So regressions are typically captured at the very early stage of the automated test, like meaning that like if you have a bug in the code, or if you're having a specific packages that's not there part of the staging, it is important for you to quickly go and test this and identify what's happening within the code at the very early stage. Also, we need to have a easier process to quickly move the artifacts or the packages from from your development instance to a staging environment, and quickly do an integration test as well. So that way, like you are not finding any major bug in the production. And also it like definitely makes the QA process more also the QA team can spend less time testing this, identifying what's happening on this. So if you do the majority of the testing by yourself and confident with the code, then it the process once it gets into the QA side, it makes the life easier for the QA team as well. From the delivery standpoint, so this with lots of tools that's available right now, there's also a lot of complexity that comes with it. How do now a DevOps engineer needs to understand all the process that's involved with respect to the coding, like how you have done the coding, what packages you are using, that you need to understand a lot of things. With the continuous delivery and manage through DevOps, you are avoiding all of that. Like, as a developer or as a data engineer who writes the code can also quickly go and test and take care of like majority of the portions that like your DevOps engineer can do. So it basically like removes the complexity, and also you can release much quicker as well. Like if you wanted to send something quicker and do a quick test, and this like continuous delivery process helps you to quickly move this on a frequent basis, and you can test. Like you can even have a smaller test cases that you can attach it to it and quickly run this without having to worry about like pushing everything once in a week or something like that. So this put a like less pressures on decisions, like whether like your code, like do I need to wait for my rest of the team to complete so I can do my entire testing. So this kind of removes all that process in between, so you can quickly run something, test something, and move into production. So I'll be using a lot of terminologies as part of this this workshop. The first one is like what we call it as a build pipeline. So what is a build pipeline? Build pipeline in this scenario is basically a set of steps that build test, like your unit test, and also like packages the code and notebooks, right? Like, so basically like, as part of the build pipeline, be providing something like a sample YAML file, which will be used as part of Azure DevOps. So the main three components, I would say, like as part of Azure DevOps, we'll be talking in this workshop again and again, would be one is the build pipeline, which is like building the steps that involve to build the development code. The second thing would be a release pipeline. So set of steps that like, so once I have the packages with me, I wanted to like release this package to staging and automatically test this, and then like finally move that to a production as well. So that is what a release pipeline means in DevOps. And finally, like also we will be using something called a trigger. A trigger could be of anything, and an event. So I have multiple branches as part of my Azure repos. So I have a master branch, and I'm taking my own branch and start working on my code. And let's say that like I'm merging my code to my master branch. At that point, what I wanted to do is when every time a code get merged, that could be a trigger. So when a code get merged, what I wanted to do is like go to the next step and start deploying that in staging, and then like give me the test results. So it could be anything that initiates a pipeline is what we call it as a trigger. And also the assets and artifacts, which I mentioned at least a couple of times before. Like an artifact is nothing but the libraries that you use as part of your notebooks. The notebooks and everything encompasses is what we call it as an artifact. And we'll also be like using different environments. For this workshop, I'm using a single notebook. As part of that, I'll have a 3 different directories called like development, staging, and prod. But you can in real time, it's also you can use you will be using like 3 different environments: development environment, staging, and prod. And in Azure DevOps, it's basically like adding another variable, and then like you'll be just pointing towards towards the environments. But like the steps is exactly going to be the same, except that like you just need to add like one more variable as part of the variables, which I will be like showing you as part of this. Stephanie, any questions so far?
No, you're doing great.
Okay, perfect. So, a typical workflow so there's 3 different ways to test your code in Databricks. So the workflow number 1 is basically like you might be having a team that working only on notebooks alone. So like you basically have like every workflow has got its own advantages and disadvantages. Like, from the advantage standpoint, if you are using only notebooks, like it's pretty easy for you to go and do an experimentation and then like quickly um, uh, deploy that. But like what the also, like, sometimes it's going to be like when you wanted to automate the whole process, like it's going to be, you may feel like little difficult with respect to notebooks, because like now some of your other team might be using IDE based workflows as well, right? So notebooks are super easy to quickly do an experimentation, but like, the main challenges is like when you try to like testing and chaining the jobs, like, which I will show you how we can um, overcome that. And the second part is like, using a IDE side of approach. Like if you are using a PyCharm or Visual Studio, you can also like use write your code as part of the IDE. And once you write your code as part of your IDE, you then can deploy the code in like from your IDE to your Azure repos as well, and then like follow the entire CI/CD process. This one is quicker, but the feedback loop is typically like much longer. And the third approach is kind of a mixed. Mixed doesn't mean that like I will be writing some part of my code in IDE and not the some part of the code in notebooks. Like typically that's not what we see in our approach. We see like either a team that's working in notebooks and there is a separate team who's working in IDEs, and they come up with the libraries that will be used by the notebook, the team that's using notebook. So, but Databricks provides an easy option to do the entire CI/CD process for both your notebooks as well as your IDE-based approach, also for the mixed approach as well. So you might have seen this testing pyramid at least a few different times before. So what this means is like in a CI/CD, why we need to do a CI/CD within Databricks, right? Like so, typically the unit test that you are running, like you want that will be like when you run your unit test as part of your CI/CD, like the initial stage of like you writing a data frame and testing the data frame out or creating an UDF, those are all like smaller packages that like smaller you write on a daily basis, and you wanted to test that as quick as possible. And like that's where like the unit test is like really important. And when it comes to like the next step after that would be like quickly creating an integration test. Like integration takes involves like working with Spark notebooks, or like even like once you finish with the notebook, you wanted to run that notebook as part of a job and wanted to schedule the whole thing. You wanted to see like how that works. And finally, the whole functional test that you run, and then integrating with other system, like in case you wanted to work with an external metastore, or you work with like an S3 bucket, like, or all of those things can be of an external testing. So in this pyramid, if you look into it, like unit tests are something that can be quickly done and easily deployable and quickly test. But as in when you go to the pyramid, like it's going to be a little slower. The idea of CI/CD within Databricks is to make all of this process to be like much more quicker, and to show you like how we can easily done this with the click of few buttons alone. There are few libraries that's available when it comes to testing the Spark, and this is like quickly show you what all the libraries that's available. Like I said, like this is like will provide you with the GitHub link and with all the information how to do the testing on your own on this. For the testing, I have like I also have the Chispa framework that I'm using as part of my code as well. So before I go into the demos and the individual strategy, I like to repeat that these demos are not like set to show or a definite way of build and managing your CI/CD, but rather than this is the main aim to like introduce you to the different tooling which is available using CI/CD with Databricks. So with that, before, so there's two steps with respect to Databricks. One I wanted to talk about is like before Workspace 2.0 and after Workspace 2.0. So before Workspace 2.0, what happened is like so there is like you see there is a development staging and a production environment that on the top of it, and there is on the bottom of that there is a local environment followed by the CI/CD process, like a branch master and a build server, right? So before Workspace 1.2, with repos not introduced, what we used to do is like you have the notebook and you develop as part of the local environment, and then like you import that to the development environment, from which the notebooks are then pushed like pushed to a versioning control, could be GitHub or like Azure DevOps, and then we build everything and push that towards like a staging and production environment. With Workspace 2.0, with the introduction of repos as part of the Databricks, this process has made it much easier and quicker. So in this scenario, what you can do is you can simply ignore the local development side of it. So you can consider this as like you start with your development environment, and repos with Workspace 2.0, like repos are part of it, and then you can just like use repos to quickly sync your code to version control, and then like start deploying in staging and prod. So let me go into the next one. So this is a pictorial representation of the steps that we will be doing today. Like if I want you to take like one thing out of this workshop, that is this slide. So what this means here is I have three environments here. One is the development environment, and the other one is a staging and production. As a developer, a data engineer, or a person who's writing the code, I write the code as part of my development instance, and then commit the code to my repos. Says like GitHub, but it could be Azure repos. So I'll commit my code to Azure repos. As and when something gets committed to Azure repos, what I wanted to do as the next step is take that code, check out the latest version of the code from that branch, and then I wanted to run a few different tests as part of it, and get the test results from that from the staging environment. So this is a development instance, I'm pushing the code, and then like goes into the staging instance, like I'm getting whatever the code that's there, trigger few tests, pull the test results out of it. And if I'm happy with the test results and the same test, then the same code base can be then triggered to a release pipeline. And that release pipeline deploys the code into the production. Before this, the code is getting deployed in production, you can also have somebody who's manually going and approve the code. And as part of the demo, I'll show you like, how you can do that. Like, so this is exactly what I'm going to show as part of this workshop or demo. Like I said, in the notebooks, if you go into log into Databricks environment, you will see repos there, which is where like you will be pushing your code towards your staging and prod on production environment. The other thing I wanted to quickly cover on this, which I'm thinking at this point is in the interest of time going into the notebook and show this rather than like with the slides. Let me go to the slides, notebooks, and show directly on that. So when you log into the Azure Workspace, like you will see there is repos here. Before repos was instead introduced, like the way to do this is like you write your code, and then like you can go into the version, and you will see there is a Git component there. You can enter that, like, as you can say, like, this is a legacy feature. With the introduction of repos, we wanted to use this. But like, if you are still with the notebooks, you can do this. But like, our recommendation is definitely to start using repos. So coming back to the repos, so I have the repos here, and for this demo, so let's say that like this is my repo, and there is like my production environment and my staging environment. In this scenario, I'm keeping everything as part of one single workspace, but this could be typically a production would be a separate instance, and staging would be a separate workspace as well. So what I have here is like, so let's say that like somebody already wrote a code, and like, I'm me coming here, and the very first step is like, I wanted to download the code from the repo and start working on that. The first step is like, you click the add repo, and then like you will see an option here to select which provider are you going to use for this. So in this scenario, I already have, I'm going to use Azure DevOps. I can select this, and going into my Azure, I can quickly go and let's go into my Azure. So this is like, this is my organization, and I can quickly go and create a project out of it, and then I can basically like copy like, this information and put it as part of my notebook environment. Sorry. As part of my notebook, so it will automatically understand like what's happening with this, like, and then say like a create repo. What happens when I do that? Like, it's going to take all the code that's part of that repo, and then like add it here as part of my workspace, So once I have it, so typically there is like, I'll start writing the code, like, so this one way of writing the code is like, you'll be like quickly going into the notebook, start writing your code, do some testing. But in typical real-time scenario, it's always not like, you'll be working with one notebooks, right? Like you'll have your notebook, and there is like, for example, like, you are writing a notebook that is focusing on getting a data, like an ingestion pipeline. The next could be a next set of notebook would be basically like do a transformation, and the third set of notebook could be like a machine learning, and finally like you are like this encompasses the entire pipeline, right? So in scenarios like this, what you will be doing is like, if I run my code with you will use something what we call it as a percentage run, right? Like, so I'll call like, percentage run code 1, percentage 2 code 2, and also like, want to quickly introduce what I call it as a nutter. Like what I'm using here is a nutter, which is like nutter is a simple Python library that that helps you to run unit test in Databricks notebooks. So it's basically kind of a framework, or kind of like an orchestration kind of thing, which gives you option to run your code. So in this scenario, this is built by Microsoft. Like, so what I'm doing here is basically I'm creating a nutter fixture, like which is the it's basically a set of what I call as the constructors that I'm using here, which will be used by all of my methods. And a nutter fixture is basically consider this as a test class that you'll be inheriting, right? So it's a collection of one or more of test cases, and each test cases can have at least like one assertion function. So in this scenario, but I can also have a test case can also have like a before and after. What I mean by that is, I wanted to call code 1, like a notebook 1, and then I wanted to call notebook notebook 2, and then I wanted to do notebook 3, and finally I wanted to run the entire test cases or something like that, right? So in this scenario, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm writing basically in my code. I'm in my assertion function. What I'm doing is calling the code 1, and then calling code 2, and finally I'm putting everything, and then with my assert function that I have here, I'm calling that basically step 1, step 2, step 3, and then I wanted to run this, right? So this is one, if I have a percentage run, there's one way of doing it. But let's say that if you have a um, if you are doing this in an IDE kind of environment, then what you will typically do is so let's say that I have a you create a package. Within your package, you are just writing a simple Python code, right? I have a Python code 1, and then I have a Python another Python code. I can also do the same thing with arbitrary files as well. So what an arbitrary files is, basically I can, instead of doing a percentage run on code 1, so percentage run works in notebooks, but but in an IDE kind of environment, this doesn't work. So I can do something it's basically how you import a Python library. It's something similar to that. From my package code 1, I'm asking it to go and take the code and then start running as part of it, right? So also this also provides that can you also if a code changes on code 1, for some reason somebody makes the code, modify the code, I can that can also, typically in notebooks, it's a context based, right? A notebook, you make a modification, one notebook does not reflect to other one. So I can auto reload. There's a functionality as part of the admin, you can enable that, and this one, anytime there is a code changes happens, that it will automatically take it as part of the Nutter functionality as well. Okay, so I'm going to use on the third thing I wanted to quickly talk to you is when you create something like this, create a unit test kind of folder, and have so create something like this, and this should start with a test underscore. So what Nutter does is it's kind of a keyword. When you have when I point Nutter to point towards my workspace, I can call it as anything starts with the test underscore, Nutter will automatically identify that okay, this is a test case that I need to go and run as part of it. So let's come back and show you a quick demo on this, right? So I have the repos here. This is my code 1. I quickly wanted to make some modification and then push this code to production. So before that, I want to show you in repos. So this is my this is my personal workspace. As you can see that this one is pointing towards a repo called trigger testing, right? So when you click here and click the git, you will see an option where all the branches that are out there available at this point. You have the trigger testing, releases, master, other features. It could a master is a master branch, and then a feature is something like my personal branch where I start working on this. And trigger testing is also another personal branch that I created out of master, and then I write a modification or I change the code and then push towards it, it automatically gets merged to master, and then run the entire code for me. So in this scenario, what I'm going to do is let me take, this is my own branch. I'm going to take a simple code and add a let's say that or it is a temp view. So now I made a modification to in my repos. What I wanted to do is just go and push this code towards my to run this. I wanted to do the entire testing. So as soon as I do this, what you can see here is I get identify the code change that I have done from my previous one, and I can quickly run a commit message here. So in this scenario, I'm going to call it as added and commit and push. As soon as I do a commit and push, what's going to happen here is, let's go into my um, Azure DevOps. Like I said before, in Azure DevOps, the three things that's most important, like one is the repos. Repos is where all my code are already available, which is where like I took a copy of that and then like created this. So which is my start with the repos, and there is a pipeline. And pipeline encompasses like a build pipeline and there is a release pipeline, right? So with the repos, so I made a change. I committed this change to my um, uh, I pushed the code to repos. So what happens then is then it automatically calls my a build pipeline. I will show you like what I put it in as part of my build pipeline. So this is the comment I wrote as part of the create a temp view comment on this. If you look here, what happens as part of the build is, this is my build pipeline. So what happens as part of my build is, it's doing a few different things, and then like it's also executing my my tests actually in my staging environment. So let's go back like until this takes like a couple of minutes to run until like let it go. In the meantime, I wanted to quickly go and show you how the pipeline looks like how the build pipeline looks like. So let's go to the pipeline. So this is my Azure build pipeline look like. What it is called is like I'm using a set of variables called like nutter testing, and I'm specifying what branches. Like in this case, I'm getting everything from the head branch, and then like there is also like I'm setting up like this is an YAML file. As part of the YAML file, I'm setting up like the stages here. A stage could be on push. Every time there is a push happen, do a set of things on that, and every time there is a release happens, do a set of things as well. So in this like in this case, what I'm doing here is on push. Every time there is a push happens, what I'm telling here is like basically install. I'm doing a pip install of Nutter. I'm installing Databricks CLI. And the next step, what I am doing here is once that is installed, I'm using CLI. I'm using the with CLI, I can use like anything with you see as part of the Databricks workspace. You also have a CLI way of like accessing that, or API way of accessing. In this scenario, like I'm using Databricks repos, and what I'm saying is like update everything from this branch, and then I'm putting like Databricks host and token. So the host is where you need to be aware of that. Like for my scenario, I'm creating everything as part of a single workspace. For your scenario, you can also keep it as different host as well. So this is where you will be configuring the host. I'll show you in so I made it as a simple Databricks host, but you can call it as a Databricks staging host, Databricks production host kind of thing in your variable, and then that way it will be like pushing towards a different set of environment as well. So what I'm doing here is a Databricks I'm calling it as a host token. I'm calling using the token here, and then I'm doing a like a set of tests on top of it, and Nutter gives me and also gives me a test results back as part of that. So let's go back into the pipeline now. So this is the pipeline I ran. So yeah, this is the pipeline I ran before. So let's go in and look into the pipeline. So it's completely passed. So what it does is like it used Python 3.8, like which I specified as part of the YAML file, and then like it's getting the latest branch, and then like installing all the dependencies that's needed for that, and finally like updating the staging environment. Whatever the change that I have done now, it's now will be reflecting in my staging environment. And also like it's just push the notebooks as well, and the best part of that is like not just pushing the notebook, it also runs the notebook for me, and by calling Nutter, because I'm calling Nutter, and then like I'm not even specifying a lot of information on that. All I'm saying is like go here, and my execution like result should be as part of this, or like request should be as part of this, and the result should be as part of this, right? Like so what it does is then it goes here, goes to my like this is my, let's say like this is my staging one. whatever the changes that I'm making here, like you can see here, like now it's added as part of like, comment created on in the temp view. It's been like added here. Now it's moved to my staging. On top of that, it also goes and like runs the it also goes and runs the notebook as well. So it provides me the link as well. So if I go and click the link here, you will be able to see that the entire notebook ran, like, so I'm using like, it ran the notebook. It tells me it create basically it uses the Nutter framework, like it basically ran the entire notebook for me and then gives me the results back, right? So what, so this is, if you think, going back to the slide that I showed before, development code has been synced to my repo. Repo calls my YAML file. Yeah, within my YAML file, I'm installing my as part of the YAML file, as part of the build pipeline. I'm using the YAML file, which is installing my Databricks CLI, Nutter, and then it runs the code for me. And then it provides me the information as well. Like, so let me go back. So it ran the whole process for me. Like it installed the dependencies, updated the code in staging project, like executed the set of tests for me, and also provide me with how much time it takes to like pass the test. It gives me all those information, and finally the published test results gets posted to a production environment as well. So in this scenario, like if I go back into my repos again, so there is a staging and there is a production. So if you go into my production notebook and say look into like whether the code has been updated here, like you see, like there is like there is nothing updated here. There is the reason behind that. So let's go back and look into my release pipeline. If I go and look into my release pipeline, this is my release pipeline. By the way, like creating this build pipeline, release pipeline could be sound really complex, but like with the template we already provide you, it's pretty straightforward to go and do it. And the release pipeline takes like exactly 2 minutes to create one. So how does my release pipeline look like? So basically, like why the whatever the changes that I sent, like why it's not like it reflected in staging, but it's not reflected in my production. There is a reason behind that. Like, so the reason is like I'm calling it as an approval process in between on this. And once I go and approve this process, let's say that like, yeah, this is good, like go and approve it in production. What's going to happen is it's then going to call this, and then like, this process will, the release pipeline will done, and then it's going to automatically update my production notebook as well. So if you look into it now, we completed all the entire stage. Development, pushing into staging, ran a bunch of tests out of it, gets the result out of it, make sure the results are satisfied. But even then, like if you want to have a human in the loop kind of process here, have don't go and update the code in production automatically. You will be now like looking into somebody will manually say okay to that, and the code gets automatically updated. So now you see that like whatever the code I have, like with the spelling mistake I created, like the same thing has been reflected everywhere. So with this, like this is as simple as that, like creating the entire end-to-end pipeline with respect to Databricks with Azure DevOps. There's other things that I wanted to quickly cover as part of this is like, so now I have the notebooks updated, like pushed everything, worked, but there is also like, a couple of other things that I wanted to talk to you about. Is one is creation of a PAT token. Once you go here, create a personal access token from your Azure DevOps, and you can go into the user settings here, and then like with Git integrations, there is few different ways to access the Azure DevOps services. So I call it as like Azure DevOps services here. There's multiple different ways to access this. Like one is using like an Azure Active Directory or access token, and you will be pasting the your PAT token as part of it, and that's how quickly you can get integrated with your Azure DevOps. So you'll have the list of tokens. Yeah. Finally, if you wanted, so let's go and quickly show you how you wanted to, if I wanted to create a quick release pipeline. I wanted to quickly show that, say, create a new release pipeline. And then I can say, create a stage. I can create basically we start with an empty stage. I wanted to call it as to staging. I already have something called in production. So and then you have to put two different steps as part of this. One, you just need to basically, as part of my release pipeline, I'm specifying what version will be utilized as part of it. And the next thing would be you quickly add a command line to that. Let's go and add a command line. So as part of this, I just need this is what the notebooks that a Git repo we'll be sharing as part of that, which has got all the information as part of this. So I can go and So what this is going to do is install a pip install of my Databricks CLI with repos, update my code in production. I'm not running anything in production. I'm just sending it to my whatever the branch that I wanted to send it. I wanted to call it as to send it as a master branch. I can just specify this and save here. And so yeah, the other thing is forgot to mention here is what we call it as a variables. So as part of Azure DevOps, what we have something called is the libraries here, which is where you will be specifying a set of variables. So for this Nutter testing, I have a set of variables that I already configured. One, I wanted to use the same cluster ID. I'm also specifying the Databricks host here and a Databricks token as part of this, and then a production directory and a staging directory, right? This is how the code is getting pushed to my production and staging. This is what I was talking about. I can have a Databricks host. I can create multiple hosts here and call it as a Databricks staging. So let's say Databricks underscore staging, and I can have another my staging environment. I can also provide my production environment as part of this. So that way, the code will be you'll be sending to different environments rather than sending it to the same one. And this is all the set of variables. So this is all available as part of the variables. And once you create, in this case, I'm creating another testing, once I have all of part of that. So when I create my release pipeline, you can go to my release pipeline, whatever the pipeline that I was trying to create. Okay, I didn't completely create that, so I think it's let's say I create a release, and when I create that, I can specify that to staging, okay, and then finally I can do a release on this, right? So with this scenario, this will be always manually triggered, and I didn't added the artifacts here. I can quickly just go and add an artifacts as well as part of this. I need to edit this or edit pipeline. So one, I created the staging, and then I need to specify what is my artifacts, right? Where are my artifacts? I can specify the artifacts, and I can also specify the basic branch, and you can add that as part of the branch. And you can say when you wanted to a pre-deployment condition that you wanted to add, you can click the pre-deployment conditions here, and you can say that what is my pre-deployment condition would look like, pre-deployment approval. This says I can just specify. It always needs to go through a approval stage with this. Can say this. And also I can make it as an automatic process as well. I can say a continuous deployment, as and when something happens, do this. So my trigger in this scenario could be whenever there is a change happens added to a master branch. Whenever there is a pull trigger happens, always provide it I can specify which branch I wanted to give the information to. I can specify all of it as part of this. So pretty straightforward. So we talked about. Okay, so this is the repos. So the repos will have all the code changes that if you wanted to go and take a quick look into the packages, and then the code change that, like, you modified, everything will be as part of here. You can see that, like, with the same spelling mistake that I've created in my initial stage, it shows me the same one. You can see that as part of the repos. So repos contains all your packages, and the pipelines contains like two things. One is the build pipeline and the release pipeline. Build pipeline contains the Azure YAML file, which which is where you will be specifying and running a set of build status. As part of that, we are using the Nutter packages for this. And then as part of the release pipeline, you can just do it as part of the UI, or you can do it as part of the YAML file as well. And then like the whole process can go from end to end. Couple of quick things I wanted to show is, like, this is a very good GitHub information that contains all this, all the notebooks, all the entire packages that we put in together, and also the overall flow on this, like, how do you move from one to other, and how do you even configure this? Like, what would be a build pipeline look like? What would be a release pipeline look like? And then, like, a bit of troubleshooting as well. If you need more information with respect to, like, Nutter as well, there is a quick blog somewhere I saw yesterday with respect to Nutter, which I will show you as part of this, like, so that's all, like, from the demo standpoint. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll happy to give you more details.
Awesome job, Robbie. The only questions we've had have been to make sure that they get the recording and any supporting documentation and whatnot from you. So I'll just work with you after this to get whatever we can get from you that we can share and send that out. Anybody else have any questions? Don't be shy. You can raise your hand and ask your question. No takers? Nobody's brave today, Robbie. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing with us today, and everybody else have a good day.